If you're a founder, sales isn't optional. Today, we're talking about founder led sales and how to scale it without breaking your business. Join us on this episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, head of marketing for Unbounce and Insightly. Today, I'm joined by Lou Shipley. He is the author of the newly released book, Unlikely Entrepreneurs. Candidly, we get a lot of pitches for people to appear on Closing Time, but this topic really resonated with us, and we reached out and asked Lou to come on the show. Lou, welcome.
Thank you very much, Val. Pleasure to be here.
So one of the things you mentioned in our pre-call, Lou, was that the name of our podcast has some special meaning for you.
Closing Time. That's a song that we used to play in my last company, Black Duck Software. When anybody would close a deal, we'd play the song on the sales floor, and especially towards the end of the quarter. So and people had to sing it, and we had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, no, it's there's some real meaning for me.
Yeah, it's a catchy tune. Every time I hear it out and about now, it just brings me right back to this podcast. So glad it made some
absolutely
good memory for you. So you've clearly been in the trenches with founder-led sales. Every startup that I have been a part of, I would say the first and often best salesperson in the whole company is always the founder. Do you think it's because that person truly believes in the company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question because I work with a lot of founders. I've been in, many startups. I'm on boards of startups, advisors, investors in startups. And the common thing that I see is some founders are natural salespeople and sort of take to it. But for those that aren't, they have to go through this period of understanding what sales is and overcoming misperceptions of why sales in our culture is maligned and misunderstood. And that's partly what we teach at our Harvard Business School classes on sales. So you have to overcome your fear and disdain of sales. And once you understand really what sales is and what sales excellence is, then the founders that's what they want to do all the time, because they really are the best people to sell their company, not just customers, but investors, employees, et cetera.
So that's what you consider like stage one, when it's the founder salesman who is really out there, personally landing those first early customers. What does that stage one feel like for the founder?
Yeah. By definition, you found a company, you created something from nothing. So you see something that needs to be in the market, but your customers, some may see it, most don't. Most are pre-aware that there's even a need or a solution to the product. So the trust that's required for a founder to land their first customers is immense. So you have to develop a trusting relationship with someone who's going to bet their career on you and your company. So learning how to build that trust is really the sales process for those original founders. And we recommend that a founder closes the first 15 to 20 customers before they hire a salesperson, because then they may not be the best salesperson, but they understand the sales process, and they started to understand the sales process. And then you can bring in a sales leader or a salesperson, but you can't delegate it before you understand it yourself. That's where failure comes in.
Let's talk about that next stage where you're either bringing a co-sales leader in, your first salesperson, or your first maybe sales manager. When founders hire sales leadership, what sort of pitfalls do they need to avoid, and how do they have to evolve to support that person?
Well, Val, thanks for asking that question, because my answer comes out of failure myself. So I've failed in this one. So the most common mistake is bring in somebody you've worked with before, or somebody who's been there, done that, and has a track record for success in whatever your market is. Well, and that seems sort of logical and obvious, but what if you do that and you delegate too much of the creation of the sales culture, then you're at risk of having somebody bring in both their sales process, methodology, compensation plans that worked at another company, but may not work for yours. Yours has to be designed around what your buyer's journey is, how your customer for your specific product wants to buy. So So that's why the selection of the first salesperson or the first sales leader is so critical, is that they need to understand what's unique about your situation and adopt what worked for them in previous companies to your situation. And too often I've just seen people come in, and I made this mistake myself, bring a comp plan from a previous company, hire people that were really good at one industry into another. And it often fails, most likely will fail.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or the worst, it's your brother-in-law or something.
Well, let's not go there.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of that stuff. Right. Yeah. Oh my, yeah.
So we'll shift to stage 3. In stage 3, you've got, obviously you have enough momentum where you might need to bring in a chief sales officer. So your founder, as a founder, you're stepping back really from the day-to-day operations of sales at that point. But, you still own revenue as a CEO and founder. So what does that stage look like, and how do you find that person?
What it takes to be a great founder is really different than what it takes to be a great CEO. And there are some people that are able to bridge that and be great at both. I'll give you 3 examples. A fellow named Kevin Frechette, co-founder and CEO of Fairmarket. Zach Morides, founder of Teamworks and great CEO. David Friend, co-founder of Wasabi and CEO of Wasabi. But more often than not, somebody's good at one or the other. In fact, in my case, I was actually really better as a CEO than as a founder. And so what it takes to be a really successful CEO at this stage, the stage you're asking about now, is to realize that you can't be in the middle of everything. You have to hire strong people and delegate and run interference at a very higher level while still being able to go in and, work with customers and do tactical activities. But you can't be in the middle of everything. And the mistake I see founders making at this stage is they still want to be at the center of the universe, and it won't work, because as you're scaling, you can't scale fast if everything has to go through a certain person. And in our book, Unlikely Entrepreneurs, we talk a little bit about this notion of distributed leadership and what it takes to create leadership so that your team can execute quickly and be agile while you're not in the middle of every decision.
That's really the shift then, when you're no longer, maybe you're pulled into some of the big deals or the super pivotal deals, but the day-to-day operations of the sales team is really handled and completely managed separate from the CEO or founder. That just must be a hard adjustment for that person to make.
It's a hard adjustment, and not everybody makes it. I mean, you do see like some famous tech CEOs like John Chambers when he was CEO of Cisco, or even Mark Benioff now at Salesforce. They still come in and work on the big deals. Like when there's a monster deal and they're up against their arch competitors, they'll come in and they still are on the hook and they still are responsible. And by the way, the customers want to know the CEO if they're making a huge commitment to your company, because inevitably something will go wrong. Like I was a CEO for like 13 years. Something was always going wrong with your customers, and they want to know that the company can get to the most senior level to allocate the resources to fix it promptly. And if they don't have that CEO relationship, they might go with someone else, because your competitor might have a CEO that really likes sales. So that's why you really have to still embrace it when you're still at a very large company.
And of course, at this stage, if you have a chief sales officer, you're likely now have a rev ops or sales ops team. You've got enablement people on staff. So the job really just becomes a lot bigger.
It does. Yes. You're right. Now you're talking about a sophisticated process-oriented sales organization with systems and training. And you're basically trying to create a sort of a math equation for how you build forecasting for sales. Whereas in the founder stage or in the early stage, it's sort of the diving catch. There's a hero. The product doesn't really work. You're trying to convince people. That this latter stage, it's about data and about rev ops, as you say, and sales enablement, to build this sort of math equation so you can build forecast predictability in the company. Because if you get to this point when you want to maybe be public, you have to hit your numbers. You can't miss. And so you have to know those numbers down like it's a math equation.
One thing that you have done in your career, which I find fascinating, is that you are developing sales curricula for Harvard Business School. And I've been in SaaS marketing for 25 years. And it's amazing to me that for so long, we have not had sales as an education path in our schools. Like you could major in marketing, you could major in business, but professional selling was not something that you would see on a college, list of courses, and you're working
Mhm.
on changing that.
Yeah, no, there's a number of reasons for it, Val. Well, the first one is, business schools, especially traditional business schools, sort of thought of sales as like a trade skill. Like it's not really something that you go to business school for. There, you're going to learn marketing and strategy and finance and that kind of thing, how to work a balance sheet. But but the reality is, everybody has a top line. Like you and I have top lines. It's called our salary. Governments have top lines. It's the income they raise from taxes. Companies have top lines. So the top line is so important. Why don't you teach it? And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is people have this negative perception of what a salesperson is, and they get that from whatever their personal experience is. By the way, have you ever seen the sign "No Soliciting"? It's a sign that's basically made for the function of sales. Like, please don't do this. You've never seen one called "No Marketing" or "No Finance" or "No Strategy." Those things are okay, but not sales. But the reality is, if you're going to start a company, it's the first thing you need to learn to do. So what's been very interesting and enjoyable about both teaching at MIT and Harvard is that students are very entrepreneurial now. They want to start their own businesses, and they realize, I got to learn this. I got to overcome my fear of this. And that's why the classes are very popular, because they realize, I'm going to learn how to do this skill, and we make it a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun teaching the class. But it's been very enjoyable to see. I started 10 years ago at Harvard with about 40 students. This year we'll have about 500 in the same class size, just that people are opting into it.
Yeah. On a personal note, my son's a university student and he has interest in sales, and he's looking at a professional selling minor, which I was delighted to see was an option. So yeah, I think it's an attractive path for a lot of students out there. What are you teaching in those classes that might surprise people?
Yeah, so we have essentially 4 different sales classes. So we break it up into kind of like this discussion we've been having today. There's a class on founder selling. That's developing an understanding of the skill of selling. And in that class, a student's assigned a sales coach, and we record role plays on Gong. And then the sales coach reviews it with the student. So after the semester, they feel like, all right, I know how to do this. We teach all the different sales methodologies. So that's the first one, which is, what's the skill of selling? What is selling, personal selling as a founder? The next one is, all right, you've gotten to say $1 million or $2 million in sales. How do you get to 100 million or 500 million? That's all your first as a sales manager, your first forecast, your first board member review, your first compensation plan, all those first, your first channel, that sort of thing. And then there's another class that is for really large sales organizations. Like if you're going to go work at IBM or Salesforce, we have those companies come into our class and talk about, all right, you have 10,000 salespeople, 1,100 comp plans. How do you manage this? It's a big management challenge. So those are sort of the 3 big ones. And there's one other one that I created specifically for founders who have an idea for a business. And what I saw over the years was students would come up with an idea, build a minimum viable product, raise venture capital, and then try and figure out how to sell it. And I saw a lot of failures with that model. So I said, why don't we figure out if your idea is saleable, and let's build a sales playbook before you actually build an MVP and before you get it financed. Because just because you have your company financed doesn't mean you have a right to exist. You have to get customers to have a right to exist. So that class is called the sales playbook class. The output of it is your sales playbook. If I do start this company, here's how you sell it, and here's what the playbook I would give to my first sales rep when I hire that person.
Right. I mean, there's no better way to make sure you have product market fit than to actually go out and try to sell your idea. So I think that's,
Exactly.
super important. So it
Yeah.
sounds a little bit like I know you just recently released a book, Unlikely Entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Who
Yep.
is the
Here it
book
is.
for, and what do readers walk away with?
Well, I wrote the book with my co-author, Trish Favreau, who I met when I was working at MIT. And the idea was to tell stories of entrepreneurs that are not necessarily Silicon Valley AI billionaires. It's not that I have no problem with them. I think but this is more about the person around the corner, your neighbor, who has either an idea for a business and telling their story about, I have an idea for a business. How do I get my first customer? How do I finance it? How do I market it? So it's really for aspiring entrepreneurs that are thinking about a business that may not have the confidence to do it. And we profile 17 different entrepreneurs and tell their stories. Now, we also talk about failures, right? Because entrepreneurship is about failure. I've been involved with companies that have been shut down because for a variety of reasons. So it's not just about the wins and the 17 people that have done really well. There are losses there. So it's sort of an honest reckoning, but we hope it's inspiring for people to think about, I got this idea, maybe I can do it. And so some of the people we profile are very inspirational.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of trial and error out there with entrepreneurship. So maybe reading this book maybe saves people one or two of those mistakes, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if nothing else, it's a fun, entertaining read. We have people that started breweries. A woman has a sustainable sausage brand, a person that sells caskets online. So these are not just, there's some tech companies in there too, but these are really unusual business and unlikely businesses. And that's why it's kind of fun and entertaining.
Lou, this was great. Thank you so much. Without sounding too cheesy, it's closing time for this episode.
Okay, thank you so much, Val. Really enjoyed being on your show. And congrats on all your success.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to Closing Time. Remember, you can get this episode and every episode delivered right to your inbox if you click that link in the show notes. And we will see you next time.